This month's diary entry has been a difficult one to complete. Not that this entry will be problematic, this entry has just changed a lot from what the original idea had been. Back on the 11th, I had a solid idea on tribalism in the TTRPG community, and I was unable to distill it into a cohesive point. Over the last 2 weeks, I've been thinking about the expectation of information and how that has changed with the additions of the game. Despite that, the purpose of the thesis failed to meet my own expectations of what it should be. My desire to pull these monthly entries more central in the month was fought by the topics themselves not getting into line. And then, just last night, during a session, I developed a cohesive thought about that problem exactly. However much I want an idea to work, sometimes they just don't. Other times, like this entry, the topic will write itself as everything naturally flows together. The ease in which the idea works says nothing of the quality of the core idea. The ease in production comes from the appropriateness of the timing and the place of execution. I have dozens of plot lines in my games going at any time. Every campaign has 1 or 2 active central plot lines, and then at any point, 1 or more characters have their private plot lines waxing and waning in every campaign. Not all of these plot lines are great. I want them to be. I put time into them and want to see them blossom at the table. But sometimes there are ideas that I love that turn into teeth pulling during the implementation. Getting players to interact with a plot line, even a very personal one, can become a slog. In theory, the ideas are good. They just gum up when they hit the table. I don't want to get into specifics on a particular rough plotline for an individual character, because that seems like a call-out for something that isn't their fault. So for a broader example, these rough-to-execute plots can sometimes happen when a revelation occurs that is supposed to change the party's perspective on what is going on in the game. In one of my games, I had a scientist antagonist that had been doing some less than savory research that opposed what the players were doing. The party managed to acquire some of the documents of the researcher, but they never actually looked into the documents until after the adventure was completely over. The information was meant to give more context and change how the players interacted with the coming encounters. Instead, though, the party maintained a very gamey mindset of room clearing, monster hunting, and looting. They only looked into the information after the SWAT teaming of the dungeon was over. From there, the information became all retrospective and bulk. It felt bad. It was confusing. Things had this going point to point like a PowerPoint presentation, as opposed to these kind of documentary effect I wanted to go for that was meant to provide perspective and depth to the topics and locations as they came up in the dungeon. The idea was good, or at least I think it was good, and I will likely be trying it again with some tweaks in the future, but in this case the idea got gunked up in how it operated at the table, and at that point in time, it felt like a failure. Things just did not naturally flow from one course to the next. Opposite of this, though, the idea that hit the table last night was perfect. It flowed and developed absolutely perfectly. Now, this will take a bit of context to understand, but this all flowed so naturally that I think you'll be able to follow along. The first thing that you need to know is the player character, Lyle. Lyle is a human shepherd druid. He loves animals, loves fey creatures, and loves to have fun. He is a prankster and a wild child. His personal goals are all about contacting animal spirits and gaining influence with the fey. Second, you need to know about 2 courts of the fey in my world. There are a bunch of them, but for this story you need to know 2 of them. The Court of Currents and the Fertile Court. The Court of Currents is all about abiotic nature. So the elements, tides, currents, streams, erosion, tectonic plates, all of that stuff that happens in the natural world that does not itself have a life. Opposite of this is the fertile court, which is biotic nature. It's all about plants, animals, fungus, loam, growth, decay, the stuff that has to do with life. The rulers of these two courts might have had a romantic history together, which will come up in a bit. Third, you need to know about the end of the first arc of this campaign. In it, Lyle made a pact with the Queen of the Court of Currents to save a friend. Lyle, this druid all about animals, made an oath to serve the Queen of Abiotic Nature. As the campaign has continued, he has been super into trying to increase his connection to the Court of Currents, understand it better, vibe with it. As I developed out plans for where Lyle's greater arc might be headed, I realized that the Fertile Court wants Lyle, whether for his combo of animal and fae tendencies, or simply in opposition to the Court of Currents. Wanting to drop a plot hook into the game to begin this story's development, I built an initial encounter where the first traces of this could be seen. The party wasn't railroaded into the encounter, but it was definitely highly likely to occur. There is a lot of criticism in running RPGs about false choices, about having an option of 2 doors, but the locations on the other side are changed to make sure the characters go the way you want them to go. In this case, I gave the party plenty of choices that were legitimate, but to an extent, the choices were almost predetermined. The adventuring party had just returned to Lyle's home region. In addition to visiting, they were going to go to a mage's school that was located in the woodlands that Lyle grew up in. When the party turned their attention towards the school in the region, they had a few options for travel. They could take 2 days, go a little bit out of the way to a village to stay the night there, and finish the journey the next day. Alternatively, they could forced march straight to the school through the wilderness, or finally they could simply get to the woodlands in the first day of travel, have a relaxing evening for Lyle to show his friends around the area he grew up in where he started getting his druid powers and all of that, and continue on to the school the next day. So, it's a choice, but it's not really a choice. Entering the forest, Lyle made remarks about maybe finding some fairies to play with. This would be ironic foreshadowing for the prankster for the future. The party found a campsite next to a lake, and Lyle gathered a herd of deer to sleep with them, generally vibing with that whole relaxing where I grew up shtick. In the morning, the flavor text of waking up to the spring morning as their first time camping out in months was the snapping and falling of a tree in the distance. Sending an animal companion out to investigate, I let the party know that this was just beavers making their dam in the spring. The party had their goal of the school a few hours away, but Lyle asked if it would be easy enough to divert towards the beavers along the way. And yeah, sure. Totally, go do that. I didn't ask if he wanted to go, but this was also a phantom choice that was supposedly freely made. Getting there, he spoke with the beavers, and they encouraged him to help build their dam, which he more than happily did. Kind of a choice, kind of not. As the party was getting ready to leave, the weather turned and a supernatural tornado emerged from the woodlands. It diverted towards the dam Lyle had just helped build as the beavers fled to safety, and Lyle chose to oppose the twister to save the dam. Kind of a choice? Mostly not. When the battle map came out, there was shock between whether I had just happened to have a map of a dam waiting, or if I had been scrambling to put something together during the game, as I have done many times before. I even joined in with aghast claims of them thinking that I had manipulated the whole situation, which, dear listener, you realize that kind of, maybe, not really. We'll see. With this, the battle revealed that the Twister and an interior lightning creature were elementals seeking to destroy the dam. Halfway through the fight, a vine and moss-covered fey mammoth emerged from the woods to aid the party against the elementals. As the party was winning, the beavers stopped fleeing to form a little bit of a peanut gallery, chanting to the druid that someone's in trouble, someone's in trouble. Only after the elementals were defeated did the whole party start to understand the beavers. Everyone could understand the jeers. Everyone could hear the voices talking about someone being in trouble. And then the beavers exploded into glitter to return to their true pixie forms. The vine mammoth claimed alliance to the fertile court and minorly pressed Lyle that he would do well with a change in partnership. It was very much like a Harry Potter sorting hat, you would do well in Slytherin sort of vibe. Lyle realized that he had helped animals cut off a flowing current, a flowing stream, and then opposed the elementals that were trying to rectify that. The druid took a solo flight in bird form to contemplate the vine mammoth's words on fitting better with the animals than the currents, but that was in comparison to the fact that Lyle still owed his patron for her aid for saving his friend. Later on at the school, Lyle researched into the archfey of the Fertile Court to learn of his domain as well as the crossovers with the Court of Currents. The moment he learned of the two rulers' past relationship, the player immediately knew he was in the middle of a lover's quarrel. While I explained some other facets of lore, the player understood the most generic version of what this entire plotline was. Plenty of twists and turns in the future would be happening, surely, but within half of a session, a plot hook had been dropped outside of view and had been found and developed to the point of the player having a solid expectation of what was to come. Now, did I manipulate the session for the sake of the plot? Were there false choices? No, I don't think so. There were many opportunities for the party to not get to the end of the encounter, but each of those offshoots were so minor in context of what was going on. The core idea, the center of the entire plot, flowed naturally with the character, with the story, and with how the players think through the game. On the whole, this plot could be considered a worse idea than the scientist plot that had slopped across the table in a different group. The scientist plot had depth, originality, and a unique experience. This fighting Fey lovers plot, using mortals for the fun of it, and that's been retried over and over again. It was old when Shakespeare used it in A Midsummer Night's Dream. But despite that, it worked so much better. The ease at which stories develop at the table does not reflect their quality. It reflects how well they fit with the current zeitgeist. The ease in which a thesis for one of these diaries develops, or how well a video series goes, has nothing to do with the quality of the idea. It is all about how the current state of everything accepts or denies them. Future states will react differently to the same idea, and it is to no fault of the idea, the maker, or the audience. This is my SendingKenku. Do not judge a work's quality based on a single moment, but by the context of the whole. Moments are fickle. Worth extends beyond time.